Catholic Connection is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
You're listening to the best of Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Well, I'm so excited to have Courtney on with us. She's an author and a journalist, and she's based in Rome. And her book, as we mentioned earlier, Blessed Carlo Acutis, A Saint in Sneakers. She's a graduate of Harvard, and she's reported from news bureaus on 3 continents and published more than 1,600 articles, but who's counting on the Vatican, the Globe, Catholic Church, and international religious freedom. Currently a Rome correspondent for our very own Catholic news agency and EWTN News. Courtney, I know you're going to be in Rome for Thanksgiving, sweetie, but happy Thanksgiving to you and congratulations on the book.
Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
All right, so let's dive in because we were just talking during the break about Blessed Carlo. What a special thing that he's going to be named a saint. But let's talk about the book. What prompted you to think about writing a book about this amazing young man?
Yeah, well, I first remember hearing Carlo's story when I first arrived in Rome in 2018, and I remember being just fascinated by the fact that there was a computer coding teenager born in the 1990s who was on the path to sainthood. And for me, being based in Italy as a Vatican journalist, I was kind of in the right place at the right time. I was able to attend Carlo's beatification mass in Assisi in 2020 at a time when Americans weren't allowed to travel to Italy for tourism. And there I remember seeing, so many books written about Carlo in Italian, but at the time there wasn't anything written about him in English yet. And his story was one that, I wanted more people to know about because he really shows us what holiness can look like in the 21st century.
Yeah, and I also think, and you know this well, I also think that with all the issues we have with media today and all the separation and divide it causes, he really used it to bring people, especially Catholics, together, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. Carlo shows us that it's not necessary to unplug completely from the modern world to remain faithful. But I also, I think there's a reason why Pope Francis has put him forward as a model for young people of what holiness can look like in today's modern society that's rapidly changing with technology, with social media, cell phones. One of the things that I think Carlo really teaches us is that, he loved computers, he loved the internet, he loved technology, but he didn't get lost in an online world. He was very present to the people around him, and he was very devoted to the Eucharist. And in particular, and he attended daily mass as a high school student and as an elementary school student. And I think for him, prayer was really the great secret of his life. And by being rooted in the sacraments, especially daily Eucharist, confession, prayer of the Rosary, that kind of gave him the graces to approach technology in a healthy way. And I think that's a great lesson we can all learn from Carlo.
What's also interesting, and this is very similar to the situation with Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, their families were not very faithful. And as a matter of fact, even after his first Holy Communion, his parents and his mom especially, who's been interviewed by EWTN so many times, says that really Carlo saved her soul and got her going back to church. But Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati grew up in a similar situation, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think a lot of people are surprised when they hear that a 15-year-old, someone who died of cancer at 15 years old, like Carlo did, is going to be canonized. They might assume, he came from a really devout Catholic family. But that just wasn't the case with Carlo. His mother has attested that, they attended Mass for weddings and funerals, but didn't even attend Mass every Sunday. But Carlo was first introduced to the faith in a very particular way by his nanny from a very young age, who was from Poland, who was likely the first person who kind of brought him to Mass and taught him how to pray the Rosary And Carlo just took to it with such enthusiasm from a young age. And then it's really beautiful. He was a very curious person, even as a kid, and was always asking a lot of questions. And his mother has shared how, her little son was asking her all these questions about the faith and about God and about heaven. And as someone who, wasn't a practicing Catholic, she was kind of struggling with how to answer them. And so she sought out the help of a local priest to be able to answer her son's questions. And as she learned the more of the why behind Catholicism, she was reverted and came back to both his parents came back to the practice of the faith. And that's one of the extraordinary things about Carlo, had just this contagious faith that, not only his parents, but other adults too, were converted and baptized to become Catholic after getting to know Carlo.
The book is Blessed Carlo Acutis, A Saint in Sneakers. So I asked you this during the break, but I don't think we had time for you to respond. Where's the best place to get the book?
You can find the book online. Of course, it's in the EWTN religious catalog. It's also on Amazon and directly through Ignatius Press on their website. Beautiful.
So tell us, if from your perspective, someone doing the background check and all the writing and research you did for this beautiful book, what surprised you? I mean, you probably had a basic understanding of who he was and his love of the Eucharist, but what surprised you about him the most when you were putting the book together, Courtney?
Being based in Italy, one of the fun things working on this book was that I was able to travel to Milan and Assisi and interview. He only died in 2006, so it's a rare opportunity with a saint who's going to be canonized to be able to interview many people who knew him when he was alive. And I think one of the most surprising and just hope-filled interviews I did was with a grown man who converted from Hinduism to Catholicism after getting to know because of Carlo. His name was Rajesh Moher, and he was from the island of Mauritius, and a very Hindu family. His father was a Brahmin Hindu priest, and he'd studied in India, but he didn't have much exposure to Catholicism until he was hired by the Acutis family to serve as an au pair. And as part of that job, part of his role was to bring Carlo walking in Milan to and from school. And Carlo always liked to stop in the chapel to pray in front of the presence of Jesus in the tabernacle before and after school. And just in watching Carlo and his devotion, and then, Carlo was a very outgoing kid, and he loved to talk about the things that he loved, which was the faith, heaven, and the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. And by having these conversations with this little kid, Carlo was still in elementary school when he taught Rajesh how to pray the rosary. And that eventually led, through that witness, and also seeing Carlo's love for the poor was another key element, convinced Rajesh that, this is the truth and how he wanted to live as well. And so he became baptized and fully entered into the Catholic Church. And that was a great moment of celebration. For Carlo in particular. It was very excited. And it's just amazing witness to see a young boy, elementary school, who just has the courage to talk, and the love of God that's just contagious, that converts adults.
Yeah. So we kind of tend to think, not that we're limiting it, but I guess in a way we are, because he's young, he's only going to influence the young, which he is doing in a big way, but he's also influencing, as you just pointed out, adults as well. Let me ask you about when he first became interested in the internet. He was naturally gifted. He just had that technical ability to be able to work so well with that medium. What was it that sparked his interest? Was there a particular event, or how did that come about? Do you know?
Yeah, Carlo was an only child, and he was really a self-starter and very curious about learning new things. He taught himself how to play a musical instrument. He also loved to play with a camcorder and make movies. And this just naturally, with this curiosity about the internet, was something that he showed even in elementary school. And his mother kind of saw this interest in her son and got him a computer coding textbook. And that's how he learned how to code. But one of the things Carlo's most known for is also his how he used the computer to help spread devotion and the knowledge of Eucharistic miracles. And that's another great thing we can learn from Carlo, is that he wasn't just online
right.
Promoting himself on social media or posting selfies. He was actually he had this foresight to see it as a tool that he could use to learn more about the faith, first of all, and then to share it with others.
One of the beautiful things about his tomb, as you well know, is when you go to visit and pray before his relics in Assisi in St. Mary Major, is above the tomb they have on the wall these different reliefs carved into the wall, these different images from his life. And what really just moved me so much as a media person was when I saw that image of him sitting in front of a computer, a laptop, with a big smile on his face. And that is above his tomb on the wall in that church.
Yeah, I mean, it really just speaks to the significance of this upcoming canonization. In the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church, he will be the first millennial saint, and he'll be the first computer coding saint, as well as, the first saint that I know of buried in Nike sneakers. And so it is something that, Carlo does show us, what holiness can look like today. And that's a great witness that he provides.
Yeah, absolutely. The book is The Saint in Sneakers, Blessed Carlo Acutis, written by Courtney Meras from Catholic News Agency, an experienced journalist traveling the globe, but now based in Rome, writing about all things faith. In terms of the visit to Assisi, what are you hearing about? Because you and I know, having been there many times, and as I was telling you, I was just there last week for a shoot that I did with EWTN on my new book. It's a small church compared to Santa Chiara and San Francesco. And when we were there with our tour group in October, with our pilgrimage group, there was a long line to go past his tomb and to pray in front of the tomb. Have you heard anything about plans on how to handle the crowds or anything along those lines yet?
Yeah, that's something that the Bishop of Assisi is going to have to figure out. I remember also in 2020 with his beatification, there were very long lines. But I wouldn't be surprised if they have something up there, have something planned. I remember during his beatification, it was very beautiful. They opened up churches all throughout the city with Eucharistic adoration, because that was something that was such an important part of Carlo's life. One of his most famous phrases is, "The Eucharist is my highway to heaven." A highway to heaven. I love that. Yeah, another great from Carlo that I love to think about. He said, if you sit in front of the sun, you get a tan, but when you place yourself in front of the Eucharist, you become a saint. And so, I think that there will be, ample opportunity to. We saw that during as well the National Eucharistic Congress in the U.S. Yes. Carlo was a big part of that. We had a relic of him, and his story was kind of present throughout the Congress. He was a patron of the Congress. Yeah. So I think we'll be Courtney, thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much. We'll have to have you back on as we get closer to the canonization date in April, of course, sharing thoughts about Carlo Acutis with Courtney Meras, Vatican journalist, on her book, Blessed Carlo Acutis, A Saint in Sneakers. We'll be right back.
Steve Ray here. Next year's a Jubilee year, and we're going to celebrate it in Rome. But not only Rome. This is our Saints and Shrines of Italy pilgrimage, and joining us is our good friend Teresa Tamio.
Yes, Steve, fantastical. Walking through the holy doors, immersing ourselves in the deeply Catholic culture of Italy. I'll be joining you and Janet in Florence and Assisi.
Join us this May for the Jubilee year, from Milan to Florence and much more, all the way to Rome.
Find the Ave Maria Radio travel tab at AveMariaRadio.net.
People ask how they can care for older family members who can't fully care for themselves. One answer is Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care. Visiting Angels assists adults nationwide with 600 locations to continue living at home and not have to move into a nursing home. Their caregivers provide assistance in hygiene, meals, and light housework. Services are provided up to 24 hours per day, and you can select your caregiver before service begins. More information, including franchise opportunities, is on the web at visitingangels.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I went to Las Vegas years and years ago for one of these cable shows, and I was shocked to see all these old ladies in their 70s and 80s getting off that plane, running for a slot machine. You don't have a chance to win. They're all fixed. I know, my uncle used to have slot machines.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Catholic Connection is sponsored by House of Joppa. House of Joppa's mission is to share the beauty of our one holy Catholic and apostolic faith in our homes through Catholic home decor, art, candles, statues, rosaries, and Catholic jewelry. They're gifts designed to help you live out your Catholic faith. For more information, go to houseofjoppa.com. That's houseofjoppa, JOPPA.com.
More of Catholic Connection coming up on EWTN and Ave Maria Radio.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
Don't you feel sometime like there's so many people in the world? How does he hear your prayer? Never think of that, huh? Everybody thinks of that. I'm only a little grain of sand on the seashore. Oh, but that's not true. See, God is God. And you and I have to let God be God. I don't know how he does it. He's God.
For more information on Mother Angelica, visit Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com.
You're listening to the best of Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo.
Without a doubt, the greatest leader in the history of the world is Jesus Christ. Yet for some reason, we are more likely to think of a politician, a general, a business tycoon, or even a football coach when we are asked to name great leaders in history. This course aims to correct that misunderstanding and to introduce you to the transformative power of a Christ-centered approach to leadership. 2,000 years after his death, 1/3 of the world views Jesus not only as their God and Savior, but as the leader to whom they have committed their lives. It is an incomprehensible legacy of leadership. So the question is, how did he do it? How did he establish such a legacy? And what can we learn from his example?
That is the voice of our guest, Dr. Joseph McInerney, and he is the voice and the writer of this beautiful, beautiful series, recently released from our friends at the wonderful Knights of Columbus. He's also the Vice President of Leadership and Ethics Education for the Knights. And this series, the trailer looks amazing. We'll put a link to everything on our archive section. Just a little background about Dr. Joe. As we mentioned, VP of Leadership and Ethics Education for the Knights. He's that, of course, we don't have to explain who the Knights are because they're so incredible. But just in case maybe you're a new Catholic, they're a worldwide fraternal association and more than 2 million members who do incredible work in our communities and in our churches. Now, prior to retiring as a captain from the Navy, he served as a chair of the Department of Leadership, Ethics, and Law and as permanent military professor of applied ethics and leadership at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. Now, I could go on because it has a very long and prestigious resume, but Dr. Joe, for the sake of time and so we can talk about this beautiful series, I will skip the rest of your resume if you don't mind. But thank you for joining us. Happy Advent, and thank you for this series. So tell us about it.
Well, thank you, Teresa, for the kind words and the kind intro. I'm sure my family they've heard enough of that stuff anyway, so I'm glad to keep it short. And thanks for speaking with me today. The series is a series of 8 videos. They're relatively short, 8 to 10 minutes long, and what the purpose that they serve is to help educate our members in how to lead well. What we want to do is focus our efforts to develop leaders on Jesus Christ and the virtues that make leaders great. So it's a Christ-centered and virtue-based approach to leadership. So we start, actually the first video, we start talking about Christ as an exemplar of leadership. And it's interesting because the world does not recognize Jesus Christ as an eminent leader typically. And so we want to say this is why we should. And then from there we talk about virtues, which is a bit different than modern moral approaches to ethics and morality, and then from there we hit on virtues we understand as to put it simply, morally excellent habits. So from there, we hit three fundamental moral habits that are necessary to leadership. The first for every Christian is prayer. Prayer gives us access to the grace that enables us to overcome our sin and become the people God wants us to be. And then we hit on two unique virtues: magnanimity, which is an ability to recognize your God-given talents and do great things on the basis of that knowledge. And then the second one that is paired with magnanimity is humility. And simply put, that's an ability to recognize our weaknesses, which is also crucial to leadership. So that's a very quick overview of what we try to dive into in the videos.
The intro to it was, I think, it was really helpful because they really kind of summarized it in the trailer. And what's so amazing to me is if you think about how quickly Christianity grew despite all the persecution. I think maybe the persecution probably, the blood of the martyrs is a fruit of the church. But it is incredible when you think about the tools that were used by the apostles and in the Acts of the Apostles and how it grew and the different lives of the saints, over the centuries. It's so incredible, and Jesus was such a great, and I work as a motivational speaker in addition to a talk show host, and I'm sure you do too. The way he approached people, he was able to use analogies, able to reach people. You would think more people would look to him considering what happened with Christianity after the resurrection, right?
Absolutely. It is interesting. In some ways, I think there are two impediments to people really examining Christ as a leader. One is he's always been controversial. He was controversial while he was alive, and he's controversial to this day. So some people just don't accept him, and so that's obviously an impediment from learning from him. But the other thing is that he just didn't have the resources that are typical of leaders. And we go into this a little bit in the videos, that he was born in poverty. He had no powerful friends. He had none of the resources leaders typically have, like education or political or military or legal authority. He had none of that stuff. And he didn't even seem to pursue those resources. Yet he is, if you look at the numbers of followers, he's the most successful leader in history. So it's really, not only is it interesting, it's smart to say, what did he do and how can we emulate his practices?
Yeah, beautiful. Talking with Dr. Joseph McInerney, and he is a Vice President of Leadership and Ethics Education for the Knights of Columbus. And he is also the writer and the host of the Leadership Virtue Series. We'll make sure we give you the link on our archive section so you can check this out yourself. It's called the Leadership Virtue Series. And Doctor, in terms of the lessons, it's so important for us to hear this, but why right now do you think is it even more important, this series?
Well, if you look out in American culture right now, and obviously we just went through an election, and there's all kinds of controversy, but one of the things that public polling has showed for the last few decades is that trust in Americans' leaders is actually going down. And this is true of all institutions. Pew's polling shows it, Gallup's polling shows it. And what's also fascinating, and this is exactly happening at the same time that the leadership education industry, the industry that should be supporting our leaders and making them more effective, has come into its own. In the 70s at Harvard Business School, a distinction was made between management and leadership became the thing to pursue. And billions of dollars a year are spent on leadership education in the United States right now, and we don't seem to be getting a lot out of it. And I think part of the reason for that, and it's a complex situation, but part of the reason for that is that we don't understand morality and ethics very well in our culture. And that is, morality and ethics, especially the virtues, is fundamental to successful leadership. And so that's what the series is attempting to hit, is how do we become people or how do we develop the moral characteristics that enable people to trust us so that we can lead them?
And the series was just released quite recently, correct?
That's right. We released it in mid-October, actually. October 17th, I think, is when it drops. So we're hoping that it can be a resource for as many people as possible.
How's the response been so far before we take a quick break?
So far, it's been very positive. The nice thing about the virtues is that they're, ethics can be very controversial. Death penalty, abortion, all that stuff. Virtues are not. Courage, bravery, generosity, everybody likes them.
Yeah. Good points. More with Dr. Joseph McInerney about the beautiful series, the Leadership Virtue series. We'll tell you where to find it when we come back. You're listening to Catholic Connection, a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN. We are across the country and around the globe with EWTN because we're everywhere. EWTN.com and AveMariaRadio.net. We'll be right back.
"60 on 10 with Monsignor Charles Pope.
The fifth commandment, you shall not kill. At the heart of this commandment is an absolute insistence on the sacredness of human life. We read in Jeremiah chapter 1 and verse 5, "Before I ever formed you in the womb, I knew you, says the Lord." So every human life is sacred because it's caught up in the mind and the heart and the will and the love of God. And no matter how we're conceived or any circumstances, God has always known and loved every human person. And for this reason, we are to hold sacred every human life. We are, therefore, to never murder, never kill, never seek vengeance. Of course, we have issues of abortion and euthanasia today, and we have so many ways where we in some way disrespect the lives of other human persons, and even our own life. We have to learn to respect it as a great gift from God. The fifth commandment, you shall not kill.
For more about the 10 Commandments, visit EWTNRC.com.
What are the 3 parables Jesus tells about prayer in St. Luke's Gospel? The first is what the Catechism calls the importunate friend. This is the friend who wakes a pal at midnight in order to borrow 3 loaves of bread to feed a visitor. The second parable the Catechism labels the importunate widow, who persistently pleads for her rights from a reluctant judge till the wearied judge rules in her favor. This parable illustrates the need to pray always and with the patience of faith. Jesus closes this parable with the poignant question, when the Son of Man comes, will he find any faith on the earth? The third parable centers on the Pharisee and the tax collector, commending the tax collector for his humility because he asked God to be merciful to me, a sinner, a prayer which the Church adopts as its own. This is Peggy Stanton, and this has been the Order of Malta's Minute with the Catechism.
You're listening to the best of Catholic Connection with Teresa Tamio.
Thanks so much for tuning into Catholic Connection, coast to coast and around the globe on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Knights of Columbus website is kofc.org and /virtues, and you'll find this beautiful series. And our guest, Dr. Joseph McInerney, is the VP of Leadership and Ethics Education for the Knights. He's also the writer and the spokesperson of the Leadership Virtue series. Now, you said you haven't dabbled in videos before, but you sure look like a natural there, Doc. Maybe you found a new calling.
I don't know about that. It is interesting because I used to, I taught for a decade at the Naval Academy, and so there's, the ideas are similar, obviously, to what we're articulating in the videos. But being in front of a class of students who are falling asleep is a lot less pressure than being in front of a camera that captures every mistake that you might make. So I felt like it was a significant transition, but I was very, very blessed to be able to do it.
And by the way, thank you for your commitment and your not only to the Knights, but your service in the military. That's so huge, and we greatly appreciate all your sacrifices and the sacrifices of the wonderful men and women of the U.S. military. Let's talk a little bit about why this is being so well received, because one of the points that was made in the trailer, which really struck me and gave me the chills, we were talking about that what Jesus did really at the end of the day, it really is all about love. And I think sometimes we forget that. Not that we don't love people, but we think when we think of leadership, or we think of how are we going to, evangelize someone, maybe we want to educate them in the faith. But at the end of the day, it really is about first building relationships as Jesus did and loving them.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a hard question. That's a very deep pool that you just opened up for us to try and answer it succinctly. But in leadership education circles, you see a focus on servant leadership, which is great. It's obviously, like if you read, the Synoptic Gospels, Jesus turns leadership on its head and says, if you want to be great, you need to serve. But I think even underneath that, the desire to serve is inspired and motivated by love. To be a servant leader is really the tip of leadership execution because it's so hard to serve others. We want to serve ourselves first. And so love is that turn away from self-service to service to others. But you're absolutely, and this is what Jesus demonstrates in the Gospels, is that he talks about it and then he does it. And that's in the integration between what he says and what he does, I think is one of the powerful factors in his ability to attract followers to himself.
When you're talking about leadership, and you're talking about it in the family, you're talking about it in the workplace, you're covering different areas of leadership and how it can be applied in this series?
Absolutely. I think, well, one of the nice things about approaching things through Christ and through the virtues is that it's really based on human nature. So it's applicable in any area where you have relationships with other people. And for Christians, the reality is that if you're called to follow Christ, he's calling you to be not only a disciple but to be a leader. And this is what he said to the disciples, and his first public statements is, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." So this is fundamental to our identity as followers of Jesus Christ, and it can hit every relationship, whether you're dealing with a child, whether you're dealing with a spouse, whether you're in a community organization, at work, in your parish, any relationship, even relationships where you're the junior person looking up to a leader, you still can exert leadership influence, and hopefully that's through the means of love and loving self-service, so to speak. So yeah, it's broadly applicable.
So with that in mind, obviously you mentioned this is really first and foremost for the membership of the Knights of Columbus, which has a huge impact at the parish level. But I would love to see people using this as maybe their own kind of study, because it's so beautifully done. And these are important, these are issues that we all have to address, and these are important gifts that we all need to embrace.
Absolutely. And to be honest, Teresa, we've only hit the tip of the iceberg. Magnanimity and humility are this nice pair of virtues that are really important to leadership. But just to make a quick point, we need to do more work, because the cardinal virtues of prudence and justice and temperance and fortitude, and then the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity, they're all crucial to leadership, and they're all crucial to our own sanctification. One of the ideas in the series is that if we can become good people, that'll get us 75% of the way to being good leaders. You still need some skills on top of that, which we talk about in the videos, but becoming a person that other people are willing to trust is fundamentally important. So that's part of the focus of the videos.
Talking with Dr. Joseph McInerney from the Leadership Virtue Series. He's the Vice President of Leadership and Ethics Education for the Knights of Columbus. So with this in mind and all the great lessons in this first series, you see a series of series, not to be redundant, but this could be the first of many in terms of everything that you just mentioned.
It could be, and we'll have to see how things develop and how audiences respond to the virtues. But absolutely, to be honest, I think what's interesting is that I've seen work in leadership circles focused on the cardinal virtues, which is fantastic. It's great. But what I think is even more fundamental to leadership is the theological virtues, in particular the virtue of charity, which is charity is based on the Latin word caritas, which refers to the love of God and love for God. So this is the highest level of ethics, so to speak, is the law of love, as St. Paul tells us, and what's demonstrated by Jesus in the Gospels too. So we would love to do more work in this area where we focus on more explicitly on how charity as a desire for the good, and charity that reaches its heights in sacrificial suffering for the good of others is fundamentally important to leadership.
And let me ask you a personal question, because you have such a different, unique background in the military leadership that you had and the way you served for our country, but also being so involved in the faith in the Knights of Columbus. What led you to get more involved in a faith perspective, Doctor, in terms of teaching in the way you are now with the Knights of Columbus and the other work you're doing?
To put it succinctly, it was my mom. my mom forced me into it. No, she didn't. Well, actually, it was a little.
She prayed you into it. She probably prayed you into it.
She prayed me into it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little St. Monica going on here.
I was going to say,
but so it's interesting. Not to give you too much of a long story, but I was a person as a college student, and after college, I never left the faith, but I kept it at a distance because it was demanding things that I didn't want to give, and so when I got engaged, my mom thought, you need to engage your faith. And eventually I followed her lead and read some books that she basically, told me I needed to read, and it opened up an intellectual engagement with the faith that I've been pursuing ever since for the last 30 some odd years. So it really,
a smart mama.
I mean,
yep.
Yeah, they had laid, my mom and dad had laid that foundation, but it became explicit when I was in my early 20s, when I was actually at sea on ships. So I was showing strange signs, reading John Paul II and St. Thomas Aquinas, and not understanding anything that I read, but I was very, very excited to get into this stuff at that point too.
Well, we are sure glad you did, and I bet, we don't have time for you to answer this question, but I bet, as my father used to tell me, because I told you he was in the Merchant Marines for many years and sailed the seven seas, sailed around the world, and he always felt close to God out on the ocean. He said it made him appreciate his faith even more, because you look out and you could be on this giant ship, and it's like a toy boat in the bathtub, and you realize the depth of God's creativity, his creation, but also the depth of the Catholic faith. Doctor, thank you so much for this beautiful series. And before we let you go, remind our listeners where they can tap into it.
Oh, thank you, Teresa. And you can tap into this at www.kofc.org/virtues.
Awesome. Dr. Joseph McInerney, VP of Leadership and Ethics Education for the Knights, on this beautiful new series, Leadership Virtue Series. We'll be right back.
Christ is the answer, with Father John Riccardo.
I repeat, I'm sure ad nauseum to the guys who are here, a line from Pope Benedict Emeritus now, who used to say over and over again, to be a Christian is not the result of an ethical choice, but the result of an event, an encounter, a meeting with the living God in the person of Jesus Christ. This and nothing less is what it means to be a Christian. So we said the new evangelization is new in ardor. That's a kind of old-fashioned word. What in the world is ardor? Ardor is zeal, fervor, passion. Are you passionate about Jesus? Passionate about Jesus? Are you zealous for Jesus? Are you fervent for Jesus? Are we fervent for the gospel? Are we passionate about helping this world come to know him?
Dr. Ray Guarendi.
When I've had enough. I ask parents, when do you decide to discipline? One of the most common answers is, when I've had enough. If discipline is designed to teach, then we need to discipline before we've had enough. We need to discipline because the behavior's wrong, not because emotionally it's pushed us to our edge. Besides, when you get to when you've had enough, you're much more likely to yell and scream and say things that you have to go to confession for. So, the suggestion is discipline out of principle, not emotion. Principle means because it needs discipline, and I'm going to do it when I'm calm. Emotion means I'm going to be moved to do it just because I'm mad.
You're listening to the best of Catholic Connection with Teresa Tamia.
Welcome back, Catholic Connection. Great to be with you. Taking a look at the media and what we can watch and maybe what we might think differently about if we're going to watch something, but just to be aware, a really important discussion on the media that we just had with Father Mitch Pacwa, and something to think about all the time. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so glad to be part of EWTN, because we do such a good job in offering people so many different resources and opportunities, and even not only with our own outlets, but to kind of discern what's coming at us in terms of things out there in the secular press. And that's why we are so glad that Joseph Pronechen with the National Catholic Register is with us. And we're going to talk about two movies, one on Netflix and one that we talked about also last week with the wonderful Father Chris Alar on the Immaculate Conception film. But first, Joseph, let's start with Netflix and the Mary film. Tell us about it. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, sure. Thank you for having me on, Teresa. Netflix is one of those. Excuse me. Netflix has Mary, which is one of those films that, I was looking forward to see, and I was hoping for the best for it because a Catholic director, DJ Caruso, who for all intents and purposes seems to be, a practicing Catholic, good practicing Catholic. I thought it was going to be a really, really excellent film for this time of year. However, I found it very disappointing in many regards. It started out, you had over 70 rewrites over a few years for this film. You had input from Christians, Catholics, Muslims, Jews, all on the story of the Nativity. Now, too many cooks spoil the broth. We've heard that before. And that certainly happened, I think, in this film. And I've never seen a film in all the years that I've reviewed films and all that had so many producers and co-producers. Usually there's 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 at the most. But this had well over 20 co-producers, including Joel Osteen. Somehow got in there. But anyway, what happened was that a lot of what Luke says about the gospel has been kind of disregarded and tampered with, and that was very, very unfortunate, in a way. It looks very authentic, in a sense, atmospheric. Okay, so there's a good job done on that, and they really try to do a good job. I think their heart was in the right place to start with, but something went awry along the way, and when I mentioned forgetting about Luke, all that visitation between Mary and Elizabeth is kind of like pared down to a little visit in the cave over the only light is a little bit of a fire from a cooking going on over there, and all the beautiful words of Luke there in the Magnificat gone. Elizabeth is not as excited as she should be, and it takes place in a couple of seconds. The film does just about, the particular scene does in about. Another thing that this is a little minor point, but it bothered me. Here, Mary and Joseph are driving along in a horse and buggy. Now we know everything else is atmospheric.
Are you?
No,
sorry.
Buggy, yeah.
Why'd they just put him in a car, for crying out loud, Joe? I mean, seriously.
Exactly. I know. I said, see, what happened to the donkey, and then
right.
And even if a couple of people, Jewish people had horses, they were the super rich.
Right.
Not a horse and buggy. But,
oh, my goodness.
One way the film goes right is by not, the director purposely did not want to use star power, he said, because that would distract from the story. Okay, so he used Jewish actors for most part, and most of them are pretty good. The girl who plays Mary is fairly well. She's young. She kind of projects that innocence of Mary. She projects the sweetness of Mary. She projects the obedience of Mary in many respects. But then, at the beginning of it, she says, well, I'm going to tell, this is Mary, I'm going to tell you my story, and you've never heard it before. Well, you certainly haven't heard it this way before.
Oh, really?
You got to pick up Luke,
Yeah, hello.
They didn't bring her into the temple until she was 12. Now, girls left the temple at 12 because they were considered marriage age. They had to start getting ready for marriage at that age. And here, the Annunciation takes place, again, Luke, they forget about, not at Nazareth, but it takes place in the temple. When Luke announces to Mary over here, she's going to be the mother of God. And this is the creepiest angel I've ever seen in a film in all these years. Gabriel, this is a disservice to Gabriel. He runs around lurking in the background with a hood and a cloak around him and a hood over his face. You could hardly distinguish his face. And, I'm surprised Mary didn't scream and run out of the room when she saw this angel over here. But and then she says things like, beautiful words of Luke are gone. And she just says, let it be me. To answer him. So it's things like this that kind of are irksome, unfortunately, in the film. There is some beautiful scenes, though, in the film between her and Anna. Anna is her person that takes care of her in the temple when she's a youngster, when she's 12 over here.
Okay.
And it's the same Anna for the presentation. And it makes a nice connection because we know that Anna from the Gospels was there constantly with prayers and fasting. So that makes sense. But what doesn't make sense then is that they're running away from Herod's soldiers. And then once they kind of get clear of Herod's soldiers, Mary decides, well, we got to go back for the presentation in the temple. You know, so the chronology is all wrong in many regards, in the film. Dramatically, if you want to look at it dramatically, it works. Dramatically, as Hollywood would see it working, but that's not what we really want totally over here. Anthony Hopkins is the only name in the film, and he plays one of the most frightening Herods you're about to see.
I love him, though. He's an amazing actor. I just think he's an amazing actor.
He's great.
He's one of my favorites.
He's kind of he's terrific in this film. It's the best Herod I've ever seen on in any of the depictions of it. I mean, he is just a psychopath over here. And it's unbelievable to see him play this. So and then kind of go really nuts at the end. When he knows that Jesus is out there somewhere and he can't find him. Which reminds me, and I didn't mention this in my review when I did, but I was really disturbed by the way they treated St. Joseph in this film at the end, and I talked to the director about this. St. Joseph, I don't want to give away the film in case you look at it, but he does something getting away from Herod's soldiers that I don't think the real St. Joseph would have done, or God would have put St. Joseph in that particular regard. He does protect his family, but it's an action thriller ending. And the DJ Caruso has done action thriller movies, so he's used that particular type of ending, or pretty close to the ending for that. Although they go back to the temple after that, the Holy Family does, and that smooths everything out, so to speak. But you wish that it had wound up better than it did. And I would say that if anybody watches the film, what it should do is really prompt you to go back to the Gospels.
Hello, right?
Yes,
read the Bible.
And exactly, go to the Bible, and even go to some of the other non-biblical sources, like for example the Life of the Blessed Virgin Mary by Blessed Catherine Emmerich over there. Now, it's in detail. Now, that would be closer to what would have happened than, obviously, the Hollywood version over here. So, and that, a number of priests have recommended that book, too. So that's unfortunate that it didn't come out much better than it did.
Well, Joseph, we so appreciate your honest assessment, and also reminding folks that if you're watching something like this, it's always important to make sure you go to the original source, as you mentioned, as in Catholic teaching and Scripture, because Hollywood just wants to take liberties with everything. All right, so we talked about the Netflix film Mary, and let's go next to the beautiful film that was released recently, I Am the Immaculate Conception, the Marian movie. What do you think?
Oh, that was fantastic. That is a must-see. Now, it just left theaters, but on the 17th was the last theater showing. But I'm sure that is going to be on a DVD very shortly. So watch for that. I wish I could have gotten an exact date of release for that before this show, but I wasn't able to. It's a docudrama. So what you're seeing here is some scenes from the Bible that are dramatized, obviously, and then you're going to see a number of narrators talking about what you've just seen about the Immaculate Conception. But Michael Kondrat, the Polish director, this was done in Poland, by the way, the film. It's in a fantastic English, superior English, so you don't have to worry. There's no subtitles. Everything is done in English, and it presents Mary over here so very, very beautifully over here. This Polish actress, again, it's good that she isn't a star power over here known as, but this is one of the best on-screen portraits of Mary I've seen. She does this with such grace and so superbly and she doesn't age range from a young teen to a sorrowful mother at the crucifixion in a Pieta scene. She's very subtle about Mary's emotions, but yet you know what Mary's emotions are, and she's doing it so subtly. We can practically tell what Mary's thinking in each of these. There's a really beautiful scene over here, in the Gospels, when we're talking about, you wonder sometimes why Jesus said, answered when he said, your mother and your brothers are outside looking for you. And he answers, here are my mother and my brothers, as he looks at the crowd. Whoever does the will of my Father is brother and sister and mother to me. And you wonder, what Mary's reaction was that? What did she think? Well, I'll tell you, there's an answer here given in Mary's face that is going to light a spark in any viewer's soul and mind. It's beautiful. It's just beautifully done, and it's so clear what Mary is thinking when she sees or hears Jesus say that. And the same thing with the Pieta scene over here. And there's lots of prolonged scenes focusing on Mary's face, and without a word, this actress gives us a sense of hope and calm and a vision for the future and her place in this and Jesus' place in this and what Jesus is. It's just so well done. And I must say, here is one of the best Magnificats I've seen in the film. I could tell you this without spoiling it, but Mary and Elizabeth are meeting, and it's that joyous meeting. And what happens is the whole Magnificat is there in Latin, sung. And underneath, it's not Mary singing, it's an off-screen singer, obviously, doing it. And it happens to be a girl from Romania who has like 4 million listeners on YouTube. She focuses only on sacred singing. A young girl, a magnificent voice, and you'll see why viewers will when they see this particular Magnificat done that way. And then you have the Marian fathers like Father Donald Calloway, Father Joe Roche, Father Chris Alar, fantastic concepts. And Father Chris gives he brings out so many things so beautifully in this. For example, like when Mary and Elizabeth meet, he says the original language says that we have it in our Bible translation as the baby leapt in my womb. Elizabeth says. Well, he says the original language really says danced in my womb, and that brings you right to David
dancing before the ark. David dancing before the ark. Yeah, Joseph, we're out of time. I could talk to you about this forever, but thank you for such a comprehensive summary and review of both Netflix version of Mary and, of course, the beautiful film I Am the Immaculate Conception, the Marian movie. Joseph Pronechen is with the National Catholic Register. We will put a link on our archive section, but you can still find it at thenationalcatholicregister.com. A beautiful, beautiful discussion this morning. Thank you, Joseph, so much. And let me wish you a very, very, very Men of Christmas. Great discussion, and really appreciate it. And again, if you're going to see that other film, Mary, make sure you have your Bible with you so you understand what really happened. They weren't hanging out in a buggy, a carriage, and a horse. Just getting that straight. I don't know why the media do that, but what are you going to do? Joseph, thanks so much.
People ask how they can care for older family members who can't fully care for themselves. One answer is Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care. Visiting Angels assists adults nationwide with 600 locations to continue living at home and not have to move into a nursing home. Their caregivers provide assistance in hygiene, meals, and light housework. Services are provided up to 24 hours per day, and you can select your caregiver before service begins. More information, including franchise opportunities, is on the web at visitingangels.com.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically owned shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866-AVE-MARIA or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Do you have a teenager at home who's full of potential? Too often the world is telling you to be content with mediocrity instead of raising respectful and responsible young adults with strong character. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Ray. If you need some help, not only to navigate those teen years, but to really enjoy them, check out my book, Standing Strong, Good Discipline Makes Great Teens, as well as my other books on the store page at AveMariaRadio.net.
Catholic Connection is sponsored by House of Joppa. House of Joppa's mission is to share the beauty of our one holy Catholic and apostolic faith in our homes through Catholic home decor, art, candles, statues, rosaries, and Catholic jewelry. They're gifts designed to help you live out your Catholic faith. For more information, go to houseofjoppa.com. That's houseofjoppa, JOPPA.com.
More of Catholic Connection coming up on EWTN and Ave Maria Radio.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to Catholic Connection. And just remember, if you're a new listener or not, if you've been on board with us for a while, you may not know that we are co-produced actually by Ave Maria Radio and EWTN. And you can find us both online, all kinds of great resources at EWTN.com and AveMariaRadio.net. Now, I give you those websites quite often because I want to remind you, if you heard something on the show today, yesterday, last week, you can go to those websites and you can go to the archive sections or you can look them up and we have records of them for you. And if you heard, let's say, maybe about a book or a document, you can certainly go to EWTN in the religious catalog to order an item, or you can look up any type of encyclical or papal document or information about any of our shows there as well. So these are great resources in addition to great Catholic radio every day. We'll see you next time on Catholic Connection.
You've been listening to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo. Catholic Connection is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio, and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Our producer is Andrew Kruchek. For copies of this program or for more information, visit AveMariaRadio.net. That's AveMariaRadio.net. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for another edition of Catholic Connection.